This is really part two of what we did on Tuesday night, so there will be a bit of overlap, but we're going to go on and look at some of the other issues about the teachings of Richard Dawkins, which we need to be able to challenge. Just notice in that reading in Ephesians 6 and verse 12, it talks about our struggle with the world. In our case, it's not a struggle of flesh and blood. We don't go out and have to fight people in the streets. We have to fight against principalities, that is, governments and authorities. And bear in mind that the sort of thinking that we're going to talk about tonight has infiltrated the education system from universities down. And against the against the rulers of the darkness. And today we're going to talk about people who are the rulers of the darkness. These are the people who dominate to bring the world out of the light of God's truth into darkness, and to vacate from people's minds any thought that God exists. So they are the rulers of the darkness of this age, and that is spiritual wickedness in high places. And these are important people. These are educated people. These are people that get on television. These are people who write books that are distributed all over the world and who influence the way that our education systems operate. So this is the powers of the rulers of darkness of this world we're going to talk about. Now, we're talking about Richard Dawkins. This is his bus that he goes around England in, on which is the slogan, "There's probably no God, so stop worrying and enjoy your life." And what he's trying to do is to get people to say, well, look, let's just throw God out of consideration and we can do what we like. And that's his motto. Stop worrying and enjoy your life. And he's a great publicist. He gets a lot of attention. He gets into a lot of debates on television, and he's written a lot of very famous books. So his most famous book is called The God Delusion, and that is trying to convince people that they are deluded to believe in a God. Other books he's written are called The Selfish Gene, The Blind Watchmaker, etc. He's actually got a whole series of books, all of which have been bestsellers, and which have influenced far more than we realise the thinking of the age in which we live. So these are the rulers of darkness we want to talk about. Remember the mind of the wicked? God says the wicked renounces Yahweh. They actually say there is no God. All his thoughts are there is no God. But the Bible says that people who say that are actually fools. And one day that will be proven to be so. But that's what the wicked do. They renounce God. And they say there is no God. Now, we noted the other day that they've picked up this symbolism from the Bible, from Revelation. And these four guys, Dawkins, Hitchens, Dennett and Sam Harris, who's gone off the bottom there, they all class themselves as the four horsemen of the apocalypse. So there are their books: Hitchens, God is Not Great, The End of Faith, The God Delusion and The Blind Watchmaker, etc. These anti-God books that these guys have put out. And there they are, the four characters we talk about, the rulers of the darkness of the age. So think of them as that, because they are atheists. Now who can define for me what an atheist is? What's an atheist? Come on, somebody? Yeah, it means a no-God person. See, theos is the Greek word, or the Latin word for God. Atheist, put an A in front of it, it means no God. So these are no God believers. They don't believe in any God. Different to an agnostic. An agnostic says, I don't really have any, I got no idea whether there's a God or not. There might be, there may not be, I don't know. So the agnostic says, I don't know. The atheist says, there is no God. So these are the people that the Bible talks about. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. The trouble is, these are the wise of this world. And people listen to them because they have what seems to be some very, very interesting arguments. Now, here's a definition of atheism, and you might notice a bit of sarcasm in this. Atheism is the belief that there was nothing, and nothing happened to nothing, and then nothing magically exploded for no reason, creating everything, and then a bunch of everything magically rearranged itself for no reason whatsoever into self-replicating bits which turn into dinosaurs. Now that's what you have when you've got no God. So you start with nothing, and nothing goes bang, and all of a sudden it's everything, and then it decides to actually create life, and then upwardly progress until you have dinosaurs. That makes perfect sense, doesn't it? But that's what you believe if you believe there's no God. Nothing went bang and made everything. That's what they tell you happened. Because they can't tell you what went bang. They don't know why it went bang. They said something went bang, and now it's everything. So this is the new atheists. We used to have the old atheists, Marx and Engels and those guys back there in 1800s. Now we've got a new bunch of atheists. And the Bible said in the very last days, one of the things that would happen, that men would turn to fables. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're turning to fables. They will believe anything, that they don't have to give some honour to God. Now, here's Richard Dawkins. He said this: "It is absolutely safe to say that if you meet somebody who claims not to believe in evolution, that person is ignorant, stupid or insane." So that's how they look at us, because we say we believe in God, the Creator, and we don't believe in evolution. They say, well, if you don't believe in that, you're ignorant, stupid and insane. Now, if you can just read down the bottom here what Dawkins had to say. He was challenged on television when they said, well, has scientific discovery says you have to be able to watch something happening and then you have to be able to replicate it. So that's the two tests of science. So you experiment with things and you see what happens, and then you do it again and you replicate it. So you've got to be able to make sure that process actually does happen. So he was asked, well, has evolution been observed? You say evolution is scientific. Has it been observed? Well, he said it has been observed. It's just that, I'll read the bottom part for you. Evolution has been observed. It's just that it hasn't been observed while it's happening. And as it says over here, who's stupid and insane now? But no one's observed evolution ever happening. So, nor can they replicate it. They can't go out and they can't make something happen. Now, you might have heard of amino acids. Anyone heard of amino acids? If you've ever studied evolution, it's one of the things they throw at you. Back in the 1950s, a guy in America claimed that he'd actually mixed these acids together in various quantities, injected them with an electronic charge, and they replicated. They actually divided into two. And everybody puts this down, that amino acids are the way that life was formed, because there was a division of cells. Now, a couple of things about that. No one's ever been able to do it again, and nobody saw it happen. He just claimed to have done it. But it's in every textbook that amino acids can do this. So they tell you that somewhere on the earth, when the earth was just after the Big Bang, the earth was here and it rained into a puddle and there were just the right amount of chemicals, and then a bolt of lightning hit that puddle and it formed a cell which became life. Do I sound like I'm telling you fairy stories? That's exactly what people believe about amino acids. And it's never been replicated. They've tried and tried to do it again since this guy claimed it in 1956, and no one's ever been able to do it again. So the question is now, did it actually happen in the first place? So, this is the sort of thing we're up against. They call us insane and stupid because we believe in God, and yet they're believing in the greatest bunch of fables you could ever imagine. So let's just go over again what these new atheists challenge us with. This is how they challenge religion and challenge the Bible. So they deny the existence of God and support evolution to explain life. They proclaim that religion is the major cause of evil throughout history. So you go back through history, every time there's been a war, every time there's been great loss of life, somewhere religion's behind it. So they blame religion for bad history. They insult God as a disgraceful, bullying child abuser. Remember, he made Abraham offer his little boy. Well, Isaac was actually about 37 or 35 when that happened. New atheists, well, they claim God is an angry, jealous God, demanding praise and soul worship. If you don't worship me, he says, I'm going to get very angry. So they say he's a bit childish. He ordered ethnic cleansing or genocide of the Canaanites and the Amalekites. And the Bible is somewhat weird, isn't it? Because it's got these odd laws like kosher, that is separating meat and milk products, laws about birds' eggs. And we'll talk about those perhaps on tomorrow or Sunday morning. But there were laws about birds' eggs, and they said, what's God doing talking about birds' eggs in the Bible? Well, there was a good reason for that. They say God approves slavery, massacres, the selling of daughters. He suppresses and demeans women. He kills people for very minor offences. The The poor guy who was caught, picking up sticks on the Sabbath was stoned to death. Seems a bit extreme to them. God favours one nation above all others. And humans, well, they don't need a God in their lives to be moral because they're born good. And they've just got to bring out that good. That's what they believe. So that's what the new atheists are all on about. Now, we've dealt with some of those. We will go over the genocide one quickly in a moment. Now, I'm not going to read all that out again, but you just look at all those words that Richard Dawkins uses, ending up with God as a moral monster. But I want you to notice that some of the charges that are made, that God is racist. Now, I gave a bit of this talk out at Eastern Suburbs the other night and set off a telephone exchange, that flies around on Twitter or whatever it is out there. People said I said that God was a racist. No, these people are saying God's a racist. What I said was that in their terms, God is a racist, the way they define racism. So I want to make that very clear before you set off your Twitter accounts. They say God's a racist, and in their terms, God is a racist, in their terms. Okay, well, he's all those other horrible things they accuse him of, but these guys have got very much it in for God. Again, Sam Harris, my book is designed to demolish the intellectual and moral pretensions of Christianity in its most committed forms. They have a go at Islam, they have a go at Buddhism and all other religions, but the one they hate most of all is Christianity. Because unlike those other religions, Christianity talks about a God that is very involved in your life, in the world, and in the future of the planet. With Buddhism, you die, you might come back as some other form of animal or even a better human. So it's just recycling of spirits as the Buddhism sees it. So there is no kingdom in Buddhism. When you go to Islam, what do they believe? Well, they believe in going to heaven, so there's no future for the earth. You go off to heaven and be with Allah forevermore. They don't have any concept of history or purpose. Christianity talks about the kingdom. It talks about God being involved and God being in control. And they don't like that. So that's where Christianity gets the main attack. If the Bible is true, says Sam Harris, then we should be stoning people to death for heresy, adultery, homosexuality, worshipping graven images and other imaginary crimes. In fact, we would be putting to death idolaters in our midst. And God says, is that what Israel had to do? This supposedly reflects God's timeless wisdom. So today, of course, because we don't have a death penalty, they say that God's out of step with society. Thankfully, such barbarism as stoning children for heresy has fallen out of fashion in our country. And again, you can see how they're judging God by what modern man chooses to do. Okay, well, let's just remember the facts about what we saw in previous occasions. The law of Moses was given primarily to regulate a new nation. They'd come out of slavery, they'd been rescued, and God needed to set up the nation with its laws. This country has lots of laws. There are traffic laws, there are laws for commerce, there are laws for occupational health and safety. There are laws for all things that we do in life. Because if we're going to live together, there has to be a common understanding. It's no good you saying, I disobey red lights. You won't last very long. So we have to have laws that everybody follows. So to set up a nation, God had to set up laws. We have the New Testament to help us understand those laws, but they were there for this new nation. And remember, the primary purpose of the law of Moses was to keep in check what natural people would do. Remember, the law was not for the just. The person who had faith, the person who was righteous, didn't need to live by law. The law was about keeping all the ungodly and sinners in line, keeping all the bad people in line. It was all the things you're not allowed to do. And if people have got faith and they've got generosity, consideration and righteousness, then they don't need laws. They don't have to live by laws. When you're creating a nation, you need a code of law around that nation, and that's what God provided. A legal code of behaviour to make society work and to preserve the land. And there was a lot of laws about looking after the land as well. So just remember that. We're talking about a law that was given to regulate a nation, as distinct from the law of Christ, which is about individual character. Jesus never tried to regulate nations. He never set up laws for governments. What Christ gave us was how we should live until the kingdom comes. When the kingdom does come, there's going to be a lot of this come back into being. Now, we looked at the positive benefits. We won't dwell on these, but just remember there was much good in the law of Moses to make sure that people kept healthy, that their land was looked after, and that there was consideration for the poor. And there wasn't any of the laws of God that had a negative outcome for society or the environment. So many things were positive for their health. They had a lot of hand washing in their rituals. There was the avoidance of dangerous foods. And God says, you keep that and you will avoid the diseases of the Egyptians. And the Egyptians, of course, we know from what we've dug up in their mummies that they didn't live very long. The average age of most Egyptians they've dug up is determined to be somewhere between 30 and 50 years maximum. So the Egyptians were dying because they lived in malarial swamps. They had a lot of diseases from the bad food that they ate, and they didn't know about washing and hygiene. So disease spread very quickly in those sort of countries. So there were lots of positive benefits. So there's what we've actually covered before. Now let's just go to some of the other charges. Was God a racist in the way the modern world defines it? Well, yes, the way they define it, God was, because God chose one nation above all other nations. So in the modern terminology, if you say, look, this nation is the best nation, this is the model nation for other nations, then you are a racist because you have put one race above other races. The modern world says everybody's equal, everybody's equally true in their culture. Well, God didn't say that. God said, I've chosen you to be my nation, to show my power and glory and to keep my promises to Abraham. And right into the kingdom, the Jews will still be the head of the nations. They will be the one nation people will have to learn to look up to. And even though God loves the world, God wants to save people of all nations, the Jews are his chosen witnesses. So it's no good us denying what God has done. So if that's what makes God a racist, he's a racist. So let's be clear about that. In their terms, God has chosen one nation. Why did he do that? Why did he say, get rid of these Canaanites and destroy them? Well, we noted this, because of the wickedness of these nations, your God is driving them out from before you. And I want to put you in their place and make you my nation in that land. So God says, you're going to possess their land because they are wicked and the time has come to drive them out. And you might remember that God had told 400 years before they arrived on the borders of Canaan, God had said, the iniquity of the Amorites, or the Canaanites as they were then known, is going to come to the full at the time when Israel comes out of Egypt, and they will be thrown out because they won't have repented, they won't have changed. In fact, they have gotten incredibly worse. And by the time they came there, even the children were beyond redemption. So, yes, he said annihilate the Canaanites. If you want to say that's genocide, remember Dawkins says God commits genocide. Yes, for the Canaanites and the Amalekites it was genocide. Utterly destroyed them because they were a danger to Israel. And our God has done that in the past, in the flood, in Sodom, in the Canaanite case, in the Amalekite case. God has said, I want these people eliminated. And he'll do it again when the kingdom starts. He will remove the wicked from the world. So let's just clear up the genocide one. Let's get on to some new issues now, and I want to just spend the rest of the night on new issues we haven't covered before. Does God demand soul worship? Well, yes, he does. Look what he says. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. You shall love Yahweh your God with all your heart, with all your soul and all your might. Now, there's no room for anybody else there. And these words shall be in your heart. So God's very clear. He says, you worship me and nobody else. What he says here. For thou shalt worship no other God, for Yahweh, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. So God says, one of my names is that I'm jealous. I do not like to have people sharing their affections with somebody else. For Yahweh thy God is a consuming fire, even a jealous God. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, to these idols, nor serve them, for I, Yahweh thy God, am a jealous God. And God keeps saying the same thing over and again. I am a jealous and demanding God. You serve me or not at all. I'm not going to share my affections with other gods, which are no gods. And people say, well, that's the Old Testament God, but you know, when we come to the New Testament, God's got a lot nicer, hasn't he? No, it's the same God. Look what he says in Corinthians. You cannot drink of the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. And demons there was the Gentile gods. You cannot partake of the table of the Lord and the table of the Gentile gods. Shall we provoke Yahweh to jealousy? Are we stronger than he? And if we go and fool around with other gods, and the gods of this world might not be lumps of stone or wood like the Corinthians had, but this world's got plenty of gods. Money, ambition, power, sporting heroes. We worship other gods. God says, I don't like it. So God's still a jealous God. So if God's going to be charged with jealousy, well, yes, he is. He is a jealous God, and he will remain so. So let's come on to their attack on religion. You know, the one thing these guys really want to attack is religion, and especially Christianity. They don't like Christianity at all for the reasons I explained here before. So we've got to say, can we defend religion? Now, some of you might have heard of a Prime Minister for England called Tony Blair. He was the Prime Minister in the 90s in England. And after he retired from politics, he went on television to debate Christopher Hitchens, one of these four horsemen. And in that debate, the debate was, has religion improved the world? Which is the dumb subject to accept, in my opinion, because there are so many examples where religion has actually made a mess of things. You go into the history of Ireland and you find the Catholics and the Protestants blowing each other up with great regularity. You go back to the Catholic Inquisition, where the Catholics used to catch everybody who wasn't a practising Catholic and torture them and then burn them and drown them and other things in horrible ways. Estimated that over several centuries, the Catholics actually got rid of about 68 million people like that. So religion's done a lot of terrible, wicked things. You go to Islam today, and you've got Sunni Muslims blowing up Shia Muslims. You've got Kurds blowing up Sunnis, and the Muslim world is just ripping itself apart. All of these bombing attacks and people running people over with trucks like happened in France last week is because of religion. So, do we try and defend religion? Of course we don't. Now look what we learn about the New Testament. Jesus, when he came, he not only confronted the hypocritical and corrupted Jewish religion of his time. You know, woe unto you, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites. Jesus was absolutely clear that religion as it was kept when he came into the world was not right. It was not doing the right thing at all. He condemned it openly, which is why they killed him. He often warned that there would be false prophets. People would come in his name. In the future, he said, there will come false prophets, wolves in sheep's clothing. So not everybody who's in religion is a good representative of God. And much evil has been done in the name of many religions. You know, you want to look up the history of the Mormons sometime and ask about the Mountain Meadow Massacre, where the Mormons, when they got out into the west of America, wanted to take over parts of California and actually massacred all the people who were living there already. Not a very nice history at all, but that's done in the name of religion. So a lot of things have happened which are very, very bad in religion. So we're not here to defend religion. We should never think less of the Lord Jesus Christ, because people who claim to be representing him do the wrong thing. Can I just say this to you young people? When you come into the ecclesia, one thing you have to be aware of before you get baptised is to never judge the truth by the failures of its people. If you do that, you'll soon find yourself very disenchanted, because everybody are mortals and prone to sin. We all make mistakes. When you come in, it's because you love God, you believe in God, and you will make mistakes. You will upset other people as time goes on. We all make mistakes. But the truth, the quality of God and what he has promised is not any way diminished by the fact that some people don't live it very well. So remember that. Never judge the truth by the quality of its people. So the truth is above all that. God will fulfil the promises to Abraham no matter what people do. And you've got to hang on to that as the main thing. So can religion be defended? Well, mostly not, because most religion has disgraced God. It does not disprove God's existence. It doesn't say, well, because Catholics have blown up Protestants and Muslims have killed each other, therefore there can't be a God. That's what these guys are trying to convince you. Because there's bad things happen under the name of religion, well, there can't be a God. Well, it doesn't disprove God's existence. In fact, it actually proves what God says about human nature. It is not in man that walks to direct his steps. The flesh is prone to sin as the sparks to fly upward. The flesh is incredibly deceitful. People convince themselves that they're serving God by blowing up children in the marketplace. That's how deceitful human nature can be. They go into the marketplace and they blow up or they mow down with machine guns school children, believing that they're actually doing the will of God. That's how deceitful flesh can be. It doesn't disprove God, it just proves that he's right what he says about the flesh. Look at Israel. They were God's chosen people. Given that land, given the promises, all the things that God did for them. Have they honoured God? Well, no, they've disgraced him down through centuries. God says, you've corrupted my name. You've ashamed me before the Gentiles. Has God stopped working with Israel? No, he doesn't. In fact, he says, the fact that I'm still working with them proves that I do exist. And that I'll keep my promises. Now, true religion does offer better morals and values than atheism. I want to just make a contrast now between religion and atheism. Let's just talk about Judaism. That is, the religion of the Bible, because the Jews had the Bible first. Judaism went and became into Christianity. But let's just trace what the religion of the Jews has brought to the world. A civilising influence. You go back to the codes of the ancient world, you find that there was torture, mutilation, discrimination against women, class structures built into all those laws, some terrible things in the laws of the ancient nations. Along comes the law of Moses. Women are elevated. No class structures. No mutilation, no torture, no prisons. And you have a righteous law that was given to civilise the world, which is why a lot of that Jewish thinking has come down to society today. One supreme, all-powerful God instead of many immoral, warring gods. Most of the ancient nations believed that there's lots of gods up there. There's a god of the harvest, there's a god of the sea, there's a god of the underworld, there's a god of the storms, there's a god of the mountains, and they all fight with each other. So when there's a thunderstorm on, the gods are having another fight. And inevitably, amongst the gods, whether they be Egyptian gods, Canaanite gods, or Greek gods, they were all totally immoral. They betrayed their partners, they had children with other people. They were immoral gods. So there was no morality. If the gods are like that, how can the people be any different? Judaism comes along and says there's one totally honest, totally moral, totally pure, totally holy God. And you've got to be like him. Now what a difference that makes to all these other gods that they believed in. So Judaism gave us the concept of one God. It also gives us a sense that history, what's happened to mankind or is happening to mankind, is taking you somewhere. As I said, if you're a Buddhist, all you can hope for that you're good enough in this life to come back as anything except a flea or a dog. You might come back as that next time because they believe in reincarnation. So your spirit dies and then you, depending on how good you were this time, you come back as something else next time. Even the Mormons believe that sort of stuff about reincarnation. Incredible. But when you come to the God of the Bible, he created the earth with a purpose. It's going to end up in a kingdom. And everything that happens in life is part of that process. So we have a reason for us to be here. So Judaism has given the world an incredible, different way of approaching our existence. When Christianity came along, corrupted though it was, away from the truth, nevertheless, Christianity had great moral values. They opposed Greek and Roman infanticide. That was the practice of the Greeks and Romans, who were very immoral, who slept around. But they had a practice of getting rid of the babies they didn't want, just by throwing them in rivers and killing them. They didn't want all the babies they produced. Christians came along and said, that's not on. One, we've got to stop the immorality, and two, we've got to stop the throwing away of babies. So the Christians changed that in the Roman Empire. The gladiatorial games. Any readers of Asterix? Anyone doesn't read Asterix here? You know about the games, don't you? And the gladiators? Brutal. You know, men went into that arena and they slaughtered each other, cut each other to ribbons. If they didn't put up a good fight, the emperor would say, thumbs down, and he would be killed on the spot. They had to fight lions and bears and all sorts of animals. It was a horrible thing, the Colosseum. Along come the Christians, get rid of it. So you see how they civilised even the ancient Roman world. Then they started building hospitals to look after the sick and hospices for the dying, for the old people. They elevated the status and the rights of women. Look at the 21st century woman in Islam, walking around in their burqas. Their husbands go out and speak for them. Anything to do with the outside world, the husband talks for them. And they're still under that sort of horrible oppression. Under Christianity, you find the sisters are elevated and honoured and valued by God. Christians founded universities so the world could be educated. They brought in literature and philosophy. They promoted art, science and music. Christianity was instrumental in abolishing slavery. A fellow called William Wilberforce and the Americans, he influenced the Americans to eventually rise up and get rid of slavery and injustice. And they promoted advantageous moral codes. The problem is now that Christianity is being put on the back burner, that we're getting all the immoral stuff coming back into the world. But look at what Judaism and Christianity have brought to the world in general. So we don't defend any religion against the things they do which are not right. What we do say is that religion has made a good impact on the world overall. Now, by contrast, let's ask the question, what have these atheists, people who don't believe in God, contributed to the world? Now, atheism is not a new thing, but it's never been the major opinion of the world up until the last probably 40, 50 years. The majority of people out there, you go down that street, you might get about 20, 30% say they believe in God, but don't go to church. You probably find about 60, 70% have got no idea whether they believe in God and probably don't believe in God. And there's probably others who do have some sort of religion. So let's take the atheists. And this, of course, is the powers of darkness we're talking about. These atheists, like Hitchens and Dawkins and Sam Harris, etc. What have they done to the planet? Well, they've made very little benefit to the planet. You know, a man said this. So I spent 10 years in India. I saw leper colonies, orphanages, hospitals, people picking up beggars off the streets, charities of all kinds in India, helping the poor and disadvantaged. And all of them were run by churches of one colour or another. I never saw one being run by atheists. I never saw one being run by the Humanist Society. You see, atheists, they believe that it's all about me, it's all about what I want. Survival of the fittest. If you don't believe in God, then you're left with evolution, which is based upon survival of the fittest. So why should I go and help people? Because I get nothing out of it. I mean, only cooperate because there's some mutually selfish interest to be had. So, yes, they agree that there has to be some laws, because the one law of atheism is, I can do what I like, and so can you. Nobody else tells us what to do. The only law that exists is that you can't infringe my rights and I can't infringe yours. So they only cooperate when there's some mutual interest, because Survival of the fittest is all that matters. If you've got no God, then it's all about what you can get out of this life now. So let's look at some notable atheists. You'll know some of these. But the point I want to make here is because these men we're going to look at, because they had no belief in God, the one thing that drove them was their ambition to achieve the sort of country they wanted their country to be. So no one said there's right or wrong. The only thing was power for themselves. Adolf Hitler, 20 million dead in Europe, including 6 million Jews who were sent to the gas chambers. Why? Well, his belief was that the German people were the superior race in the earth. He believed that. And that Jews and gypsies were subhumans and had to be got rid of. So there was a man who believed, he was an atheist, who believed in his philosophy. So what do? I exterminate the rest. Exactly what an atheist would do. Joseph Stalin, 20 to 40 million Russians through the 20s and 30s last century, starved or exterminated by Joseph Stalin. If they didn't agree with his particular brand of communism, they were just cut off and left to starve. Chairman Mao, unknown millions exterminated, estimated between 40 and 80 million people. After the revolution in China, all those who weren't on his side, again, were just completely cut off, starved, isolated and shot out. Some 60 to 80 million estimated. You'll never know the number. But these are atheists. Pol Pot in Cambodia. After the Vietnam War, Cambodia was a country that was left in the hands of a man called Pol Pot, a communist, an atheist. His policy was, the worst thing we can have is educated people. So anyone that had any education, any teachers, any doctors, any lawyers, anybody with an education was rounded up and shot, and their heads were stacked up in these places like that, because anyone educated might know that he was a bit of an autocrat. And 2 million people died under Pol Pot. He's an atheist. Survival of the fittest. I want to keep myself in power. I get rid of all the people who might be able to think for themselves. If man has no moral compass other than his own survival advantage, then taking life is no issue. All these atheist men were prime examples of inhumanity. But they were atheists who were practising what atheists do. Survival of the fittest. I'm going to quote you just a little comment there. The new atheists, they don't ever own up to these guys. You put this in front of them, oh well, we don't agree with them either. But that's atheism in practice. You say religion's bad, this is atheism in practice. They want us to own up to all the problems of the Christians, but they won't own up to the atheists, which is quite amazing. Now, there's a fellow in America called Jeffrey Dahmer. You probably haven't heard of him. In the 1980s, he was convicted of killing 10 people, putting them in his freezer and gradually eating them. Not a very nice individual. But when he was interviewed, he said this: if it all happens naturalistically, so if the world just came into being by chance, what's the need for a God? I can set my own rules. Who owns me? I own myself. And he said, why am I in prison? Because I was just obeying evolution. If there's no God and we all just came from the slime, amino acids, then what's the point of my trying to modify your behaviour to keep it within acceptable ranges? Now, this is a criminal, this is a shocking murderer who should have been electrocuted. But you see his logic. I did what I wanted to do. Now, the mistake he made was he infringed somebody else's rights by putting them in his freezer. But, you know, his basic theme was, I can do what I like. So who determines right from wrong? Atheists say each individual has an inborn good. Each individual decides on each situation as it arises. And the one law is, do what you like, but just don't infringe somebody else. God's morals are consistent, young people. Woe to them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, that put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Our world has turned all of God's values and morals upside down. And they're wise in their own eyes. You know, these are smart individuals. These are men with science degrees. But they've become fools. They're wise in their own eyes and prudent in their own sight. And they are willing to judge God by themselves. And God says, I have not changed. They are the ones that have moved to a different level of morals. Now I want to talk briefly in the last few minutes we have about evolution. It isn't possible for us to discuss the whole subject, obviously, in part of a talk. But I want to just put before you some crunch issues in regard to evolution. You see, these atheists say that life generated spontaneously. It just happened in this puddle, that cells were made and they divided and they grew and they became perhaps a little worm or a snail, and then they grew up to be eventually a dinosaur. And there's this upward gradation of life that they talk about. Well, the reality is the universe is out there. It has all these laws. It's incredibly balanced. You know, there's magnetic forces in the universe that are finely balanced, and all the planets move in exactly the same order. We can tell exactly in 1 year's time where the moon will be, because everything happens with great regularity. It's perfectly balanced. And there are laws that make the universe happen. The Earth sustains an amazing array of life. You've only got to watch a few hours of David Attenborough and you can actually get some idea of how intricate life is. What a shame he keeps telling everybody it evolved. But it's beyond belief that it could be by chance that animals and plants and fish and birds work together. And they have things like homing instinct. And butterflies can find another butterfly a kilometre away just by scent. You know, and nature is amazing, and that's the greatest witness that there's a God. Humans, highly developed minds, moral capacity. We've got the ability to think like God. And then we come to this matter of DNA, which is, in every human body, there's this incredible thing called DNA. It's like a chain structure. And it's what makes your body tick. It's what makes your body do things. It makes cells divide. It repairs damage in your body. So you cut yourself and the DNA says, go and fix that problem. So you've got a repair system in DNA as well. And it actually is the code of your whole life, and it's unique to you. We can tell who your relatives were generations back because of the similarity of your DNA, but everyone has a unique DNA. So this code that they're actually now working on is discovering what makes human bodies and animal bodies actually work. It's called DNA. I won't give you the name because it's about 60 letters long, what DNA stands for. But it's a complex coding. Now, Richard Dawkins, who's always rubbished God, he promoted the idea of junk DNA. So up until about 15 years ago, they knew DNA was there. But they only could work out about 20% of what it actually did. So they look at this DNA, and it's like an incredible lot of chains linked together, this DNA that we have. And they said, well, look, we can only see what 20% of these particles are actually doing. So Dawkins latched onto this. He wrote a book called The Selfish Gene and said the DNA is actually vestigial, which means it's a bit like an appendix. There's no apparent use for it. So he said 80% of DNA is actually finished its purpose and it's got to, eventually will be evolved out of human beings. So it's virtually rubbish, it's wasted, it's just got no purpose. So the whole evolutionary community got onto this and said, isn't that wonderful? You know, somebody at last got up and said that we are creatures that have got all this spare stuff that's left over that's no longer needed in evolution, because nobody knows what it's there for. It's what is called in science an argument from ignorance. If you're arguing about something and say, well, it can't exist because I don't understand it, you're arguing from your ignorance, and it's a very dangerous position to be in. Then they had a thing called the ENCODE project, worldwide project. All the scientists got together, pooled their knowledge and worked on the DNA. And lo and behold, they found out there's all these things they never anticipated that DNA can do. It's even more complicated than they thought. It's even more marvellous than they thought. And they're still finding out about the last 10%. But now that they know about 80-90% of what it does, nobody is supporting Richard Dawkins anymore. They've realised that the last 10% will probably have even more complicated methodology than they can currently work out. So DNA has actually become recognised as the greatest reason to believe that God exists. So when they got Dawkins on television, on BBC television, debating with a man called John Lennox, who's a Christian scientist, so a man who's a Christian but a great scientist, he peppered him about DNA. Can you say that DNA can happen by chance? And Dawkins had to say, no, I can't. Well, where did it come from? That's what he said. On television, perhaps some space travellers planted the seeds of life and DNA on Earth. Now there's your leading atheist. When faced with the complexity of DNA and how incredibly marvellous it is to run life, to say it happened in some little puddle of chemicals hit by lightning, even he can't say that anymore. And he now admits it had to come from somewhere else. And I say, if you can believe in spacemen, why not believe in angels? Well, he won't do that because behind them there's a God. This is Professor Andy McIntosh of the University of Leeds, after the ENCODE project was underway. The logical coded machinery of DNA and the information system it carries a shout designed to an unprejudiced mind. Dawkins' defence is based not on scientific facts but on ideology. That is, he's already made up his mind and he's looking for something to try and support his existing belief. Evolutionary thinking is teetering as a way of looking at the evidence, not because of some isolated problems here and there, but because the whole structure is scientifically wrong. There's another guy you want to research sometime, Sir Anthony Flew, F-L-E-W. He was regarded as the world's leading biologist. He was an atheist until he did the ENCODE project. He now believes in intelligent design, and he's admitted that. He said, I just can't go on believing anymore in evolution. And DNA is your greatest evidence. You start arguing on this, get the evolutionist to look at DNA and tell you whether it just happened by chance. The more you know about it, and you've got in this city Brother Alan Harrison, who's an expert on DNA, by the way. You want to talk to him sometime, and he'll give you all the detail on it. Now, this is the choice you're faced with. Who do you want to put your confidence in? Well, Richard Dawkins. We don't know how DNA came to be. Perhaps it was brought in by spacemen. We don't understand how the cosmos, that is the whole universe, came into being in the first place. We just don't know how it all began. Do you want that kind of uncertainty? There's the guy that's saying to the world, there is no God, stop worrying. Well, he doesn't know how everything happened. The Bible says, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. I'd rather go with God. There's a lot more certainty there than you have with Richard Dawkins. So why do men absolutely do anything but believe in God? Well, they say you can't prove God actually exists because science says you've got to be able to observe and you've got to be able to create it yourself and replicate it. We can't do that with God. We can't prove God exists. And young people, we can't prove God exists. We can show you mountains of circumstantial evidence beyond any reasonable doubt that there must be a God. But we can't prove God exists. So we've got all the evidence that points in that direction. But we still need to have the leap of faith at the end. We must believe that he is. The problem they won't accept that is if you accept there's a creator, then there's probably a reason why he created us. And the reason is that men should seek after him. And they don't want to do that. They want their freedom to do what they want. So why does he get a following? Well, he promotes the idea, just forget about worrying about why you're here and enjoy your life. And people like that theory. They don't want to think about God. It says in Romans, they did not like to retain God in their knowledge. And so they don't. They don't want God in their life. The greatest reason to believe, young people, is this, the Bible itself. Consistent. Got a reason for you to be here. Got a reason for you to exist. Prophecy. The fact that God can predict the future and know exactly what's going to happen, and you see it come to pass. Only a person who's beyond our comprehension can know the future. And when you go into the Bible, it's numerically brilliant. It's got moral values way ahead of its time and gives meaning to your life. It's historically accurate. Now, I want to say something about theistic evolution. In recent years, Theistic evolution has reared its head in the brotherhood. It's particularly on the internet and places like that for those who go looking for it. And I don't advise you to do that because it will complicate your life. Just the sheer weight of stuff that's thrown around is enough to drive anybody crazy. Some Christadelphians have decided that they want to compromise with the scientific consensus. They want to look good in the eyes of the scientists. So they say we're going to have evolution, but a God-directed evolution. That's what theistic evolution is. So we take out the chance and put God in place of chance, but we still have the evolutionary process. It means we have to get rid of the book of Genesis because that was only written for uneducated Jews. It was probably written by Ezra and not by Moses, and all this stuff they come up with from theology. And they try and put God into evolution. And that's a very strong movement. And there's a number of people being put out of fellowship in recent times because of this belief. I want to just quote you a couple of pioneer writings. This concept that you can actually say that the book of Genesis was not written by Moses and it was just a bunch of stories given to poor uneducated Jews. Brother Collier says this: in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. With that bare assertion and the briefest of preambles, the Bible story opens. So the Bible starts with God created. That's how the Bible starts. Simple, basic message. The most incredibly powerful verse. In the beginning, God created. So you got God and you got God making it. Well, it doesn't fit with evolution, does it? You've got to take the Bible as a whole. You can't just say we're going to get rid of Genesis. It goes on to say you've got to take the whole thing as one package. You just can't take part of it. I'm going to skip ahead to a few things and just summarise on some of the problems with the atheists and the sceptics. These are the reasons that evolution can't work. Incredibly impossible for just one event of evolutionary theory to take place. You think about it. They claim that lizards, some of them had scales. And as they jumped off branches, they thought, hey, I've got a bit of uplift there, so I'm going to grow those scales and turn them into feathers. You ever looked at how different scales are to feathers? Put a feather under a microscope and see how complex it is. And it doesn't matter how many lizards think that, how can they affect the change? How can they change themselves to have feathers? But that's what they say. So, impossible events. They talk about mutations. Sometimes you get a cow with 3 legs or 2 heads that is born. But even if that cow breeds with a 4-legged cow, you're going to get a 4-legged calf. Because the next generation either will not breed or cuts out the mutation. That's what genetic structures do. And every mutation is disadvantageous. It makes it worse. 3 legs is not going to do with the same job as 4. So the whole theory of evolution does not work. Look out there at the beautiful universe and the earth we live on. There's 122 scientific factors that they've so far discovered that have to work together to make life possible on this planet. 122 different factors. If any one of those alters by less than 0.1%, that is the magnetic forces, gravity, the water cycle, then life would perish. So there's 122 separate factors in our universe and our earth perfectly balanced that life might exist on this planet. Absolutely impossible to believe that happened by chance. All the different species that support each other, the bees and the birds and the animals that work together in nature. And you can go into geology and it's all back to front to what it should be. Evolution is still an unproven and changing theory. And yet we have Christadelphians trying to get it and make it, squeeze it in to fit the Bible. What a tragedy that is. Now the last challenge of Richard Dawkins is, well, you can't tell me where God came from. And we can't. We've not been told, because being human, being people who are around for 60 to 70 years, maybe a bit more, we can't understand a God that has never had a beginning. We can't understand really and comprehend a God that has no ending. A God that controls countless universes with his knowledge and power. We can't understand that. God says, you understand what you can understand about me, which is my character and my purpose. And one day you'll be part of all that eternity. So we don't try and explain God. But we ask the evolutionist, where did the first matter come from for the Big Bang? And they can't say either. We don't know. Richard Dawkins says that. We don't know. How did life suddenly come? We don't know. Maybe it came by spacemen. Where did the spacemen come from? We don't know. So they haven't got any more answers than you've got. But you've got plenty of reason to believe in God. They've only got selfish reasons to believe in nothing. And that's the difference. He that cometh to God must believe that he is. And we have to take the leap of faith to say we have all the evidence to show that there's a God. We're going to decide to believe in him. The Apostle Paul puts it this way. You've got a choice to make. That your faith, that is your belief, should not stand in the wisdom of men. You put your faith in the scientific community, you will be let down. The things they taught when I went to school have all been debunked in evolution. What they're teaching you now will be debunked. Because it's all based on guesswork and hope and chance. You've got to put your faith and base it on the power of God. And there's plenty of examples of that. So that's how they say that man came. Just a bit of humour to finish off with. For the last time, stop following me, I'm a creationist. I'm going to leave you with this thought. We all have to make a choice of whether we're going to believe in God, and we have lots of reasons to do that. Whether we're going to believe like Richard Dawkins and the atheist and say, well, I don't want God, I will do everything I can to believe in space or anything else, but I won't believe in God. I won't believe in the judgment. Well, let's leave you with this thought. I believe in God and eternal life, though all the atheists scoff at me. Well, if I am wrong, in other words, if there is no judgment seat, if there's no God, I will never know. But if they are wrong, and I am right, then they may be in for a most uncomfortable encounter.
BibleTruthAndProphecy.com is a worldwide collaboration by Christadelphians to help promote the understanding of God's Word to those who are seeking the truth about the human condition and God's plan and purpose with this earth and with mankind upon it. Bible Truth and Prophecy is part of a wider set of online resources provided by Christadelphianvideo.org for establishing just how far removed the true Christian teaching of the first century apostles is from that taught by mainstream Christendom today. BibleTruthAndProphecy.com is very much a standalone website, but benefits from our vast network of sites and resources and social media. Here are just a few of the things that BibleTruthAndProphecy.com offers. We have a good number of written articles supplied to us from brothers from all over the globe. These deal with first principle issues, creation versus evolution, the inspiration of the Bible, and so much more. We have a whole section of video study series. These are studies that have been posted onto our YouTube channel, but because of the difficulty of the search feature within YouTube, we have chosen to host on Bible Truth and Prophecy. So now every video you search for within the site, you can be guaranteed that it will be of a Christadelphian nature. We also have a preaching video section where any ecclesia is invited to download and use or embed these videos within their own ecclesial websites. We also have an exhortation service where we produce 2 or 3 exhortations per week, which we then circulate to brethren and sisters in isolation. We also have an ever-growing list of approved Christadelphian sites. We also have a page of live news feeds, so you can keep up to date with all the breaking news as it happens. We also have a section for the daily readings. Each day at around midnight we publish all 3 of the daily readings, and then later on in the day we publish Thought for the Days, often based on all 3 portions of the daily readings. Within each daily reading post there is also a link to enable you to have the Bible chapter read to you directly. We also feature Bible in the News videos which we have produced from the Bible in the News website. We also feature Brother Don Pearce's milestone snippets, which come out approximately 3 times a week. We also feature Andy Walton's weekly World Watch, and other commentaries and analysis from other brethren on world news events. You can also subscribe to the blog and be notified of posts as they happen in real time, and also subscribe to the weekly newsletter, which is provided by Christadelphianvideo.org. Every page and post on the site has the facility to be able to leave a comment or make an observation, so please take advantage of this and let us know what you think of the site.